largely unchecked power to set all sorts of rules for federal elections and to draw congressional maps warped by partisan gerrymandering. The vote was 6-3, with Chief Justice John G. Roberts writing the majority opinion. The Constitution, he said, does not exempt state legislatures from the ordinary constraints imposed by state law. Well, Vladimir Putin spoke for the first time since a weekend rebellion in Russia. A powerful mercenary group carried out a short-lived revolt Saturday. It was the most serious challenge Russia's president has faced in 23 years of rule. Putin will allow Wagner Group fighters to move to Belarus, go home, or fight for Russia. He's trying to reassert control over a very shaken nation. Audio undercuts Trump's assertion that he did not have classified documents. A recording of a meeting in 2021 in which the former president described a sensitive document in front of him appears to contradict his recent assertion that the material was just news clippings. The next hearing in the case was scheduled yesterday for July 14th. The Justice Department investigation of efforts by Donald Trump and his advisors to overturn the 2020 election results is barreling forward on multiple tracks, according to people familiar with the matter, with prosecutors focused on ads and fundraising pitches claiming election fraud, as well as plans for fake electors that would swing the election to the incumbent president. A key area of interest is the conduct of a handful of lawyers who sought to turn Trump's defeat into victory by trying to convince state, local, federal, and judicial authorities that Joe Biden's 2020 election win was illegitimate or tainted by fraud. Democrats on the Senate Homeland Security Committee today released a scathing report that detailed how the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and other federal agencies repeatedly ignored, downplayed, or failed to share warnings of violence before the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Well, with 8 weeks until Fox News hosts the first Republican presidential primary debate in Milwaukee, executives at the Rupert Murdoch-owned network Fox News are scrambling to convince frontrunner Donald Trump to reverse his threat to boycott the event. Fox is trying to get Trump to say yes. They're offering him, according to some folks, the world to show that Fox can be trusted. And in researching the genealogies of America's political elite, you'll be surprised to learn that the examination found that 1/5 of the members of Congress, Supreme Court justices, and governors are direct descendants of ancestors who enslaved Black people. They include some of the most influential politicians in America, from Republican Senators Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, and even Democrats Elizabeth Warren, Tammy Duckworth, and Jeanne Sheehan. And according to this examination, all living past presidents, including our current president, Joe Biden, are descendants of slave owners, except, get this, Donald Trump. Few of these leaders who have been exposed are willing to discuss their family ties to slavery. You are listening and watching Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In this hour, I am joined by two of my favorite contributors, Dr. Larry Walker. He's a professor at the University of Central Florida, and Dr. Raphael Sonenshein. He is the former executive director of the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs at Cal State University, Los Angeles, and he's the new executive director of a nonprofit. Well, and in honor too, we are going beyond the headlines. We're digging deep on those stories people are talking about. And today, that story is about Blacks and the great outdoors. Y'all have heard the phrase, we outside? Well, my guests today, they are really outside, and they are on a mission to uncover untold stories to reinvigorate Black Americans' love for the outdoors. And this is part of a larger effort for current generations to reclaim our rightful place and sense of belonging in natural spaces. Can't wait to talk to these outdoors people, men and women, about their mission to make sure that folks know Black folks love the great outdoors. But before I bring on my guests, here's what I'm thinking in real time. I want to congratulate two African-American women who are turning pain into purpose in Buffalo, New York. You all will remember that Buffalo was the location of a racially motivated attack by a white supremacist that killed 10 people at a neighborhood supermarket just over a year ago. Well, that tragedy has led to an incredible level of activism in the city of Buffalo, particularly amongst folks who want to run for office to have an impact on the future of that city. Democrats India Walton and Zanita Everhart consider themselves political allies, but they are pitted against each other in a race for Buffalo's Common Council, which is essentially Buffalo's City Council. Now, this is one of many local government offices at stake in primary elections that are being held across New York today. These two Black women are vying to represent a part of Buffalo that is still healing from that white supremacist attack. Now, Walton remains a political insider in Buffalo, although Everhart, she's a former television producer, has been quietly building a more conventional career in politics as an aide to a state senator. And that's where she was working when tragedy thrust her and her family into the spotlight. Now, Everhart's son, Zaire, was one of 13 people shot at that Tops Friendly Market in Buffalo on May 14, 2022. Her son, who worked part-time at the supermarket, was hit in the neck, but thank God he survived the tragedy. The supermarket, as you know, was targeted by an 18-year-old white supremacist who now lies just outside this area of a terrorist attack by this white supremacist is just outside the district where these two women are running to represent. Everhart has been endorsed by the County Democratic Party, while Walton has been endorsed by the left-leaning Working Families Party. The two women have known each other for years and have expressed respect for each other. In fact, they both say, we're not adversaries. But clearly they are running for the same office, and only one of these women will win that race and become a representative for this city council district right outside this area where the Tops Market was. I am so proud. I'm so elated to see both of these women stepping up to the plate, saying that this terrorist attack will not define this community, and using this tragedy and the pain that both of these women have endured as leaders in this community, obviously as parents whose lives were changed on that day of May 14, 2022. They're not letting it stop them. They're not letting it define them. They are turning their pain into purpose. And I am rooting for both of them. I don't know what's going to be the outcome of this election. Don't know who will occupy that city council seat, but I do know this. I do know that whoever wins this race is going to represent that district with dignity and pride and passion. And I suspect the other person, the one that loses this particular seat, will find a way to continue to be a leader, to be a positive example and a role model, and to serve the people of that city who are still healing and trying to find some sense of community, given the tragedy that struck them almost a year ago, a little over a year ago. Again, we're going to be following this race very closely. We're going to let you know who the winner is. And I am going to continue to root for both of them. I wish them both luck and say kudos for stepping up in the ways that we wish so many other folks would in our community. When we come forward, more of today's trending news with my expert contributors right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
Tell me I'm the boy that girl.
I'm young, gifted, and black.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Reuters, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a respite.
Have you visited us on?
You are listening to Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. We are tracking today's trending news and bringing you expert analysis. I am joined in this hour by Dr. Larry Walker. He's a professor at the University of Central Florida, and Dr. Raphael Sonenshein. He is the former executive director of the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs at Cal State University, Los Angeles. Welcome back to the show, Professor Walker and Dr. Sonenshein, otherwise known as Rafe, and that's a term of endearment that his mom uses, and he gave me permission to use as well. So glad to see both of you back. It feels like it's been a long time. And Professor Walker, guess what? There is no Florida story today that we are tracking. How unusual is that?
I think it's the first time.
I think it's the first. Now, there was a story about Ron DeSantis in the paper, but I just glossed right over it, and it had something to do with his team being upset because Trump was taking up all the air in the room, and he's pretty pissed off that he's not getting more airtime. But let's start with this debate that's coming up. So Fox is begging, and I do mean, according to these reports, begging Donald Trump to show up. And Donald Trump is saying, hell no, I don't trust you, Fox News. I don't like you. You betrayed me. And even though, we think that that's his network of choice, Fox is pretty pissed off at Rupert Murdoch and is saying he's not going to show up at these debates. Can they pull a Republican presidential debate off on Fox News without Donald Trump, Larry Walker? What do you think?
No, they can't. But I think this is more bluster than anything else. Let's be frank. We know historically for the last several years that Fox News, in terms of being number one, in terms of nightly major platforms for a number of years. So I really don't think it's likely that he doesn't want to be on a platform. Particularly, we all know how he likes to make fun of other individuals. And this will give him the perfect opportunity to kind of let out all this anger because of recently all the bad news he's gotten in terms of the indictments, and have to show up and, after, everything became clear in terms of what he did with a lot of these confidential documents. So this will give him an opportunity to kind of lay waste, so to speak, to those individuals who run against him, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and some of the other, Christie, some of the other Republican hopefuls who are not likely to win. So I think he'll show up. And once again, this is what Donald Trump does. Let's make it forget. He is known for being the person who's one of the producers and hosts of one of the most popular evening shows in terms of where the individual likely to go on to win. I think it was $1 million at that time. So of course he's going to show up. That's what he does. He's got to leave you with hoping he shows up, and then the day before he says, "Oh, of course I'm showing up," and then after he'll go on True Social and just talk about all the individuals like he did during the debate.
Yes, that's one theory, Professor Walker. But Rafe, I'm thinking there's more in it for Trump not to show up and do what Professor Walker said, which is criticize, make fun of, give nicknames to his opponents. By not showing up, does he send a message that these are peons and these are, underlings that I don't even have to grace with my presence? I'm so far ahead of them in the polls. They have no chance of catching up to me or winning the nomination. So let them fight it out. Let them fight over the crumbs because I'm the clear front runner. And maybe then he gets to avoid questions about his indictments, because clearly he can't be on a public stage without having to answer some questions about his capability and ability to handle national security matters, classified documents, etc. So I'm thinking that there's more in it for Trump not to show up.
Well, I agree with Dr. Walker about most of this, which is he's not afraid of this field. I mean, he's whipped these people into line so many times. They're terrified of him, with one exception. I think he's a little worried about Chris Christie. Chris Christie's from New Jersey, where I'm from originally, and he's got that New Jersey attitude, and he's decided he has nothing to lose by going right after Donald Trump. All the rest of them are terrified of him. I mean, terrified. And all he has to do is go... and they're all going to fall over, but not Chris Christie. So maybe what he'll end up saying is maybe it should be a smaller field. Maybe not everybody should be there, and just draw the line exactly one vote, 1 percentage point above Chris Christie. But he knows his value to the party, that he can go if he feels like it. But one thing I would say, though, they're not going to ask him any hard questions. The questions will be, how long have you been such a great man? And what are all the great things you'll do in your second term? They're not going to ask him anything about national security. That would be in the general election debates when he might get asked some of those questions.
Okay, you're right. I agree with you about the tough questions. They're going to throw him a bunch of softballs, but I disagree about, again, him showing up. And you give another good example as to why he doesn't want to show up. Chris Christie is a former prosecutor. He's a lawyer. So you're not going to be able to gaslight Chris Christie about the Espionage Act, the Presidential Records Act, what it means to be indicted, what has to be proven to be indicted. So Chris Christie is not going to let him get away with that. And whether the moderator asks those tough questions or not, I think Chris Christie is gunning for an opportunity to get on the stage, to embarrass Trump, to highlight his weaknesses and the issues that he has. And look, this is a guy that was close to Donald Trump. He knows where a lot of the bodies are buried. And if he wants to unleash on Donald Trump, what better place to do it than on a national stage at a presidential debate? So we're going to watch this closely, see if you guys are right or see if I'm right about him showing up in the first instance. Clearly, he's trying to extract every concession. And maybe one of the concessions Rupert Murdoch gets is, you don't have to be on the stage with Chris Christie. I'll put you on there with all your sycophants, with Nikki and Tim, and I'll make Christie and DeSantis go to a different stage and let them fight it out. So that might be something he's able to get as a concession out of the Fox News folks. But let's talk about the FBI and Homeland Security. So, Professor Walker, Trump says the FBI and all the federal agencies have been weaponized against him, that they all are targeting him in this political persecution. And then we have the Democrats slamming the FBI and slamming the Department of Homeland Security and other federal agencies for downplaying and failing to provide adequate warnings of violence before the January 21st, 2021 attack on the Capitol. So does anybody like or have any confidence in the FBI or our federal agencies that have this tremendous responsibility regarding law enforcement issues?
Well, in terms of the FBI's historical reputation, we know that Dr. King and Shuttlesworth and other members of the civil rights movement would have, certainly if they were still with us today, would have a lot to say about the FBI's historical role in spying members of the Black community who are trying to hold the country accountable. So the FBI, in terms of, particularly minoritized communities, has never been popular. And I know you know that well and more than anybody else as civil rights attorneys. So they're getting it from both sides. And so we know one side as relates to what happened January 6th. Areva, we've known for a while, the days and weeks following, that we know that the FBI and other federal agencies there were blaring warning signs that something was going to happen. It was all over social media, and they did anything about it. And this, I think that the fact that they didn't do anything about it, we have to have a long conversation about how Black people, particularly when it comes to civil rights issues, are criminalized. So fighting for equal rights, and then you have your punitive measures in the state of Florida. DeSantis passed a bill that you can't allegedly protest on highways. Then when other groups do it, they're not penalized, right? So there's this long history of penalizing groups that are non-Black for committing acts as a January 6th, so essentially a terrorist attack. Areva, let me ask this last one thing is really important. I talked about on the show, I'm a former congressional staffer. I can remember traveling my boss, Samar, we had an office in the Rayburn House office building, over to U.S. Capitol, sometimes walking or taking a small shuttle. And I can't tell you how many times I had to show my ID with my boss. So for someone like me watching January 6th and someone who lived in D.C. for a number of years, it was shocking, but also it showed me how contradictory our society is. I work on Capitol Hill. I can barely get in with my boss to the U.S. Capitol, and these individuals who have been planning for weeks attack police officers, nearly costing individuals their lives. And essentially, some people among the Republican Party just want them to get away with a slap in the hand or a pat on the back.
Well, it does raise the question about legitimacy, about public trust, Rafe. So if everything Dr. Walker said about the FBI is true, and I agree with him, his statements, ring, they have a great deal of resonance with me. But now we have the Democrats attacking them. We have Republicans attacking them. What are we to make of the objectivity and, the trust level of this very important agency? These are folks that we depend on to investigate cases. This whole classified documents case, in part, is based on an investigation by the FBI. So if they cannot be trusted, that means the results, that means the prosecutions that the DOJ pursues on the basis of their work can't be trusted.
Well, remember that this is Donald Trump's defense at court, which is not to argue the facts, but to argue a conspiracy against him, because he's going to lose on the facts. And if he was just tried on the facts. So this has been what he's done. It's why he's rising in the polls among Republicans. But there's something else going on historically, going all the way back to the Clinton and Obama years. Pressure from Republicans in Congress for the justice agencies not to focus on right-wing extremism and white supremacist movements. And every time Democrats in Congress tried to open up that research, they were slammed down and had to withdraw it. And I think in some ways, January 6th broke the dam on that. They weren't ready because they haven't been preparing for this for decades. And it's been growing and growing. And maybe it's better late than never, but they seem to be finally giving some attention to that. Of course, it took a presidential election to bring a new administration in, but that whole history of letting this movement morph for so long, even when it was there in plain sight, is in many ways an even bigger failure than not seeing what was happening on January 6th.
So are you saying that the FBI and these other law enforcement agencies are they act at the pleasure of whoever's in office, and they're just an extension of that party, even though they're supposed to be independent, they're supposed to be impartial? That's kind of scary, because what we're saying is under Donald Trump, this FBI allowed this violent attack to occur. They didn't, engage in the proper research. They didn't provide the appropriate warnings. And now are we to believe that the FBI somehow in less than, a year, it's gotten its act together and is doing the work that it otherwise didn't do under Donald Trump because you have a different administration in office?
I think that's a little more optimistic about the present situation than I would be. I would say that if Donald Trump comes back into the White House, you're going to see a complete political control of law enforcement at the federal level to punish his enemies that will be far more extensive than anything that occurred in the first term. So at the least, maybe things are not as bad as they were. That wouldn't be the same as saying that, there's been this complete conversion. But the agencies are not as bad as he's letting on because he's trying to win a case. He's trying to win a nomination and trying to win a court case at the same time. And he needs a villain. And that's a very convenient villain.
Yeah, again, doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. I think when you look at the Supreme Court, the two justices who have billionaire sponsors, now you look at the FBI agency where the Democrats are saying, a colossal failure in terms of their job, their responsibility to keep lawmakers safe and to keep our country safe from these kind of white supremacist attacks. And our institutions are in trouble. Professor Walker, we got some work to do to shore up these institutions that we rely on, we depend on. And some of the reports coming out of these institutions not inspiring trust at all. When we come forward, we're going to talk about the Supreme Court more and what's going on with the support or the court. Are they reacting to the backlash to overturning of Roe v. Wade? Because this latest string of cases that they've decided that seem to suggest they're reasonable and they're not as extreme as we thought they were going to be has me scratching my head. And maybe they're getting the message that their job, is not to be the pawn of Republicans like Donald Trump and his minions. But we're going to talk about this really important case today where they rejected one of Trump's lawyers' theory that would have radically reshaped how federal elections are conducted and probably would have given Donald Trump's team an opportunity to have him, placed as the president, whether he wins in 2024 or not. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
There are millions of boys and girls who are young, gifted, and black.
I'm young, gifted, and black.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Reuters, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Bounce is back.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head. Yeah.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search. We are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station.
We are back, and you're listening to Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. We are tracking today's trending news and giving you expert analysis, and I am joined in this hour by Professor Larry Walker and Dr. Raphael Sonenshein. And we all know that this conservative, 6-3 conservative Supreme Court is not a friend to voting rights. And we can't celebrate too much and overplay what happened today. Voting rights didn't make gains, but we prevented some really important setbacks and essentially preserve the status quo. And we know with this particular Supreme Court, if you can preserve the status quo, that is a win, because again, this has not been a friendly court to voting rights. And I'm talking about this blockbuster decision today. This is a case that came out of North Carolina where the state Supreme Court in that state had initially struck down election maps drawn by Republican lawmakers, saying those maps were overly partisan. The GOP lawmakers then asked the U.S. Supreme Court to adopt, and this is a theory came up, one of Trump's lawyers came up with this theory, known as the independent state legislature theory, and a rule that the state justices on the Supreme Court of that state, lack the power to even consider the maps. The argument was that the U.S. Constitution says election issues should be left to legislatures. Professor Walker, tell us how huge this case is and what might the ramifications have been had the court voted or had there been an order by this court in favor of those GOP lawmakers.
It was an important decision. I think it called maintaining at least the status quo. But I want to tell you what I find very interesting about this decision and the theory ISL you just described. We're essentially using that theory to dismantle democracy in the United States, where at the same time people arguing that CRT is the evil monster in the closet. So I wanted to highlight that in terms of the ultimate contradiction in those two concepts or ideas. It's critically important, particularly, like I said, Areva, you know well, in terms of Shelby County versus Holder, in terms of the damage they did to the Voting Rights Act, particularly Section 5. So we've been fighting this, swimming uphill on these issues relating to voting rights and upholding their democracy. So it's almost like we kind of hold in a whole position. And this is important for 2024, because I got to tell you, Areva, if this decision had come out on the opposite side, I don't know how much longer we would have a fair democracy, and many of us describe, because you talked about in terms of a lot of with these supermajorities, let's call them what they are, these Republican supermajorities, my state of Florida, among others, and what they're trying to do in terms of making sure that they permanently hold control of what happens at the state level, don't want to be held responsible. And then we also talk about dismantling of the Voting Rights Act. So all this comes into play. And what I want people to understand, this is purposeful. As I talked about my experience working on Capitol Hill, and I can tell you for years, my Republican colleagues have talked about doing exactly what we saw happen over the last year and a half, not only voting rights, but also women's reproductive rights. So it's really important to understand that we dodged a bullet, but as you well know, it's not over. Today we celebrate, but we still have an affirmative action decision coming tomorrow, and we also have the student loan decision coming tomorrow. Thursday.
Yeah, you're so right. We definitely dodged a really, really big and powerful bullet, because essentially this ruling, if it had been the other way, in a state like yours in Florida, if Donald Trump had lost the state, if Joe Biden beat him fair and square, and he didn't like the results, he literally could have gone to the state legislature, that supermajority in Florida that you're talking about, made an appeal to them, and they could have changed the outcome of the election and said, no, people, it doesn't matter that you voted for Joe Biden. We, the supermajority Republicans in the Florida State House, are going to determine that our guy, Donald Trump, is the winner of our state. And guess what? You don't get to go to court. You don't get to appeal our decision to anyone. And also, I think it's important to note, Ray, if the Republican lawmakers had their way, that would have been the same with respect to how they draw maps. They said, basically, we should get to redistrict, we should get to gerrymander, we should get to do whatever we want to do, dismantle all Black voting districts, and then say to those that would dare to complain, you have no rights to go into court, state courts or federal courts, because we, the supermajority in the state legislature, are the only ones that get to decide what these maps should look like. Do you think that this was just a bridge too far? I mean, when you think about the power that they were asking the Supreme Court to give to these supermajorities, it's mind-boggling.
It is, and you're exactly right. They could have achieved what Mike Pence stopped them from doing, which is they could have sent their own slates of electors to Washington to vote for president. But there's two other decisions in the last few days in Louisiana and Alabama, also unexpected, where the court came down on the side of voting rights activists. Now, look, I'm so used to bad news from the Supreme Court that I don't know how to handle good news. So I'd like to have a theory, but my theories probably never work. But one is, this is the outgrowth of people's realization of what John Roberts led regarding the Voting Rights Act. That is something that has a stain on the Supreme Court and on him personally that has to sting. A second one is the Dobbs decision. Roberts warned his colleagues that their politics was going to be in a terrible situation. He turned out to be right. And the third is that some of the justices who he thinks put the court in that position are the ones who are in the middle of the corruption investigations about billionaires. Or as one columnist said, why don't we dispense with the fiction and just have them sponsor Supreme Court justices and have them wear uniforms in their name? So there's an overlap between the people Roberts and Kavanaugh seem to be trying to marginalize a bit are also highly vulnerable now, because they're answering charges, especially Alito and Thomas, about their behavior and the people who support them. So there's weird stuff happening there. I wish I could figure this one out. And after that, we can figure out Russia, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you on that last theory. And I'll take that theory that you just articulated and expand it, because I think, as we see oftentimes by either political party, you can go so far. We saw the backlash with Democrats after George Floyd's murder, when we start hearing talk about defunding the police. You know, that language incensed people, including progressives and liberals, and we saw a backlash. And I think the overturning of Roe v. Wade has been a catalyst for a similar backlash. We saw those Republicans who jurists, those conservative jurists, sit before those Senate Judiciary Committees and tell a big lie that they respected precedent, that they were not going to overturn Roe v. Wade. And then the moment they had an opportunity to do so, they overturned it. And we saw women all over this country just push back. We saw men standing in solidarity. We saw people saying, even Republicans and conservatives, this is too far. Force 12-year-old girls who've been raped by their fathers to carry a baby, all in the name of being a pro-lifer. You know, force women in southern states to have to travel across the country to try to get an abortion to save their lives. Literally, you know, force women to carry pregnancies, Black women in Mississippi, even if it means it kills the woman. So I think what we're seeing is a response, and you're right, I think Justice Roberts, who sometimes reasonable, saying, I can't have these two corrupt justices, and he knows they're corrupt, yacht trips and $1,000 fishing lodge, you know, accommodations, private jets, etc. He knows that that's far outside the bounds of what any Supreme Court justice should be taking, paying for your mama's house and your kids' college tuition. You know, it's just ridiculous. So I think the Republicans have played their hands so far and have become so extreme in their efforts to undo our democracy that even some of the folks who we thought would be ultra-conservative on the court are saying this is too far, and they don't want the taint of being in an opinion with Alito and Clarence Thomas. Boy, if we were flies on the wall, we'd see maybe they've already, like, you know, put them in a timeout section, like, we don't want the taint. Can you imagine Ketanji Brown Jackson, you know, having to have lunch with Clarence Thomas, facing him and dealing with just all of the ironies associated with that? So whatever it is, we'll take it. We'll take this gift today. We will celebrate, as you said, Dr. Walker, today, and we will remain vigilant, because even though we may have won a battle, we definitely have not won the war. When we come forward, I want to talk about all of these living presidents who are descendants of slaveholders, except Donald J. Trump. Now, that's according to a new report and examination by Reuters. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for Black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of Black audiences are concerned about the lack of Black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the Black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% Black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black. Your Black. Your Black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head. Yeah.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
All right, Raphael Sonenshein and Dr. Larry Walker, let's bring it home. The story is so puzzling to me, Dr. Walker. Every sitting president has some relationship to slavery, and not that they were slaves or their ancestors were slaves, but that their ancestors were slave holders. Everyone except Donald Trump. What are you to make of this story?
Well, I think as an example, we talk about systemic racism and we talk about the policies that are in place to prevent Black people from achieving certain goals and how laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1965 help kind of balance, I won't use the word balance, but allow us to develop some kind of political legitimacy in states throughout the country. But I want to remind people about this point about Donald Trump is a reminder his family arrived here after the Reconstruction. So it makes sense that, his family, I think it's maternal and paternal both arrived after Reconstruction. It makes sense that they wouldn't have been slaveholders. But the fact that every other president, including President Obama, on his mother's side, obviously, was slaveholders, speaks once again to the importance of talking about not only enslaved Africans, not only about Jim Crow, but what that means for America today and how that correlates to what we see is a lot of this political violence, right? So we have to have this layered conversation about what that means and all the challenges this country's encountered throughout its history.
Well, Rafe, it seems like these lawmakers don't want to do much talking. They are doing their very best not to talk about this subject. And contrary to what Dr. Walker just said about the need to have more robust dialogue about race and race issues, these lawmakers are running from reporters and are, issuing no comment. So what do you make of that?
I'm a little surprised that they're not commenting. I mean, I think there's things that one can say about this, but what strikes me is the whole debate about history now, about American history and Black history and other histories. You have to come to a reckoning that slavery is integrally tied into the history of the United States and to the United States even before it was the United States. And to think about it that way changes the way you look at the world today. And there's a lot of people who try to describe slavery as something off to the side, kind of an afterthought, that there's the American story and there's slavery, but we don't have to pay much attention to that because it was this sort of thing that happened. But when you start to see it as integrally tied into everything else, It's a huge part of the history of the United States, including the economic history of the United States and how things were built and who built them and what that history means today. If I were them, I'd be a little nervous and a little embarrassed at the start. My ancestors came over in 1910, so, it's a little different for me, as Dr. Walker's pointing out, if you came over after. But everybody's part of that history because that's kind of part of what created the country we have today. So it's an argument for history, for doing history right and doing history more fully.
Yeah, well, we know, Dr. Walker, in states, particularly states like Florida, there is no appetite. There is no stomach for talking about history, particularly if those historical facts don't fit a certain narrative. And we even have folks in states like Florida, engaging in this, denial of our history, rejecting the notion that the Civil War, tying the Civil War to slavery. I was at an event recently where Professor Cheryl Harris from UCLA gave the history of the Civil War. And I think folks in the audience were surprised when she talked about Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation to end slavery in the slave states, to cut off the resources of the South and to bring the South to its knees, to bring the Confederate army and soldiers to their knees, not because he was such a lover of Black folks. And some were shocked and some were pushing back on that notion. So we have been, bombarded with these revisited, these refashioned, these spins on history for so long. When people do hear the truth, oftentimes they don't want to hear the truth. They reject the truth. They can't handle the truth. Dr. Walker.
And you make a really interesting point. And I've been thinking a lot about how what we've been taught in school systems, whether you're a public or private institution. And we talk a lot about misinformation, but the country and our entire history is a bit about misinformation. You just talked about when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, people don't have an understanding that Abraham Lincoln was a politician. He was president of the United States. And I think I'm paraphrasing when he said, if he could free the slaves or not free the slaves, don't worry about it. He was focused on saving the Union. And he was a politician. And I think people, because once again, this concept about what America's history is, and what it means to make America great again, to quote some of our far right-wing individuals, they fundamentally don't even understand our own country's history. And that is the challenge. And that will be a particular challenge in states like Florida, where we will see that students won't learn about their history and they will become more radicalized as the nation continues to move forward.
Yeah, I'm going to call it plausible deniability. We see a lot of that going on with our history. And Rafe, even in this last couple of minutes, let's talk about these tapes that were released by CNN yesterday, where we hear Donald Trump not talking about showing newspaper clippings or newspaper articles to a staffer and a writer, but showing these individuals who had no security clearance, who had no right to see these highly classified documents, documents that should have never been taken from the White House, documents that he should not have had in his possession, talking about them, laughing, making jokes about them. And then at the end of the clip, one of the clips that they were playing on the news yesterday, he says, "Let's order some Cokes." So, they're just the irreverence and the disrespect for national security matters. But yet Donald Trump issued a quick statement on Truth Social saying that these tapes exonerate him. I think we lost your audio, Rafe.
He's a creature of habit. He does the same thing every time. He says he didn't do it. Then you get the tape. And he said, "I did do it, but it was the right thing to do. It wasn't what you thought." And then his followers immediately say it was the right thing to do. The only difference is he's never been pulled into a courtroom. And in a courtroom, it may be a little bit different, but this is his MO. I mean, think of all the bombshells you've heard about him on tape, said this on tape, and people say, then they bring on the legal expert. They say, this is it. This is going to do it for Donald Trump. I don't even listen to those experts anymore because all I care about is seeing whether he's in front of a jury and a prosecutor can run that tape and see if they can get a verdict. That will be the moment of truth. It's in the media world. He does this every single time. And it usually takes about 2 steps to say, everything I did was perfect. It's the right thing. Those things belong to me. But that will hurt him in a court case if they can actually get the trial to start at some point, given the judge they have in this case. But
well, Rafe, I hope I'm not one of those legal experts that you ignore and stop listening to, turn your TV off when you see
I always listen to you. I promise I always listen to you.
Just got that established. Want to get that on the record. But you're so right. It's so funny. Donald Trump is so funny. In this tape, he says, I shouldn't be doing this. I didn't declassify this document. So he admits that he should not be doing it. But you're right. He'll say to his followers, I had every right to do it, even though he admitted that he didn't have the right to do it.
If you're going to do things terribly, his theory is do it in public, say you're doing it, and dare anybody to stop you. And people say, well, he must not have done it because otherwise he wouldn't be talking so openly about it.
Yeah, he normalizes, Dr. Walker, conduct that other folks are sitting in prison cells for, conduct that others have been prosecuted for, conduct that others have lost their jobs, their careers, all those lawyers. You know, my heart in some ways goes out to those lawyers who are now under investigation by the Department of Justice. Department of Justice is, you know, trying to figure out the role that they played in putting forth these fake electors, the role that they played in these fake ads where they were, you know, raising money on the big lie. And the lawyers who, I don't know what they think, if they're going to get famous, if they're going to make a lot of money. I don't know what, because the dude does not pay his bills. So I'm not sure what they're thinking. But everybody that touches anything associated with him, you know, tends to pay a huge price in terms of their professional career, and some even their freedom. Give me your quick assessment, Professor Walker, of what you heard on those tapes and what it might mean, if anything, for this trial that is going to happen in Florida, hopefully sometime this year.
Yeah, I think it's the intersection of racism and power and wealth, and whether he finally be held accountable for decades of misbehavior. So I think, you know, I think he's in trouble because he's got multiple cases. We haven't talked about January 6th or the case in Georgia. So I think ultimately time will tell, but ultimately I think justice will catch up to him.
That's a great way to end this hour. Thank you so much, Professor Larry Walker. And thank you so much, Raphael Sonenshein. Always a pleasure to see both of you. Look forward to having you back. Your insights, invaluable to Areva Martin in real time. And when we come forward, we are outside, y'all. We're going to be talking to some folks who are helping us reclaim our rightful place and sense of belonging in natural spaces. Stay with us right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Gifted and black. At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black